Okay. Then, continuing on with the Fatiha. Alhamd. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamd. Alhamd, of course, comes from the word hamada. Hamada. Now, the Arabists or the Arabic students, the definition for hamd is الثناء على المحمود بجميل أفعاله وصفاته. الثناء على المحمود بجميل أفعاله وصفاته. One more time. الثناء على المحمود بجميل أفعاله وصفاته. Meaning, Alhamd, which comes from the root word hamada, means to praise, be praised. الثناء means to praise. على المحمود, be praised. To praise that which is being praised by the generality of its characters and its actions. So when I say to you, أحمد لك, meaning I am not praising your actions and I'm not praising your personality or characteristics. I am praising both. If you want accurate Arabic, completely accurate Arabic, you say, I am praising both. When you praise both, you use the word hamada or ahmidu, then you are praising the personality and the characteristics. If you want to praise or be in gratitude to someone in terms of the bounties of someone, what are bounties? Bounties received from someone. Here, are you praising characteristics or are you praising actions? Actions, right? If you want to praise someone for their actions, for what they've given you, what word do you use? Say, shakara, to thank. So when I give you something and you say shukran, why are you saying shukran? You're not praising who I am. You're praising the fact that I gave you something. If you tell me, I give you something and you say alhamdulillah, you're going overboard, because I just gave you something and you're praising my character and my characteristics and my personality and my actions. That's going overboard. So al-shukr or shakara means to praise the giving of bounties. So when the Qur'an talks about ash-shakirin, means those who are in gratitude or praise God for what God has given them. Consequently, every shukr, every act of shukr, every act of thanks is an act of hamd, but not the opposite. In other words, shukr is less than hamd. Hamd incorporates shukr. Everyone follow? Hamd is the big one, and it incorporates shukr, but shukr is lesser than hamd. So if I say ahmidu lak, that means by definition, I also ashkuru lak, I also thank you. But if I say ashkuru lak, I thank you, it doesn't mean I ahmidu lak. It's lesser. Okay. مدح المدح madh means praise, but and not everyone knows this, madaha is praise of action only. So, if I say, أتمدح هذا الولد, and my answer is, I ask you, are you willing to do an act of madh as to this person? And I say yes. That means I'm only praising this person's actions, not characteristics, not personality. And that's why we say that every hamd is a madh, but not the opposite. So, we, in saying Alhamd Lillah, Alhamd Lillah, note, we invoked the name Allah once again, acknowledging both the actions of God, the bounties of God, as well as the essential characteristics of God. And our act of gratitude, our longing that we understand from the name Allah is not the longing of possessiveness. It is not the way you long to possess another human being, for example, or the way you long to long for an equal or even an inferior. But it is, you long for something that you acknowledge your gratitude for in terms of its actions and its characteristics. And you'll see why this is extremely important as we talk about Rabbil Alameen, and particularly when we get again to Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Let's take a 5-minute break. الثناء على المحمود بجميل أفعاله وصفاته. If you are الثناء على المحمود بجميل أفعاله وصفاته, for the purposes of ijazas, and since hold on, this off the record, don't huh? For the purposes of ijazas, there are all types of different ijazas. Now, the most serious students, the highest, would, for example, be required to say something like this in Arabic, to have it committed to memory, and say what is alhamd, and then say alhamd as-sana ala al-mahmudi bi jamili af'ali wa sifati. The lower level ijazas would require that you know the essential, would require that, we're not going to say essential, but that you know the substance, but even if you don't know the actual Arabic phrasing. Okay. We're commencing. Okay. Are you rolling it? Now, Rabb. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Lillah, we've already covered, so no, we're not going to spend it. But Alhamdulillah, Lillah. Rabb. Everyone agrees that Rabb ism mushtaq. It's an extracted name. Mushtaq. Extracted. What they do not agree on is mushtaq min mada. Okay, it's extracted, but extracted from what? 4 views. View number 1, it's mushtaq min malik, means it is extracted from the idea or the meaning of ownership. Consequently, in Arabic, we say Rabbud Dar. Rabbud Dar. Rabbud Dar means what? Lord of the house, meaning the owner of the house. Right? Second view, mushtaq min sayyid means it is extracted from the meaning master. That is why in Surah Yusuf we find a verse, يسقي ربه خمرا. يسقي ربه خمرا, meaning that in one of the verses it talks about someone having a dream that he is giving his Rabb wine. Rabb here doesn't mean God. Rabb here means master. He's giving his master wine. So that the word is extracted from the meaning master. That's the second view. And that's why sometimes you will find Rabb in the first instance used to mean owner, in the second instance used to mean master. Third, it's extracted from the word, from the meaning of mudabbir. Mudabbir means administrator or caretaker. That is why in the Qur'an it refers to al-Rabbaniyun wal-Ahbar. Rabbaniyun means scholars. It's talking about Jewish scholars, Jewish jurists. Why? Because they are the caretakers of the affairs of people. They take care of take care of the affairs of people. People come to them and say, what shall I do in this? They marry people, they organize inheritance, they divorce people, they arrange for people's burial, so on. Consequently, the Qur'an refers to these scholars as Rabbaniyun, the caretakers. Can we extract from this that scholars should be the caretakers? Not in an imperative way. In other words, there is no indication in the Qur'an that they have an official position, but perhaps a moral position. We also say Rabbat al-Bayt. What does Rabbat al-Bayt mean? Lady of the house. Why? Why do we call the lady of the house Rabbat al-Bayt? She takes care of the house. She's the caretaker of the house. Fourth, the fourth view is that Rabb mushtaq min tarbiyah, is extracted from the word tarbiyah. What does tarbiyah mean? To raise. Raiser. That's why the stepson of a woman, let me make sure I'm using it correctly. The stepson is the son of the husband, right? Okay, but not the natural son. That's why the stepson is called Rabiba. Rabiba. Why? Because this is the person that the woman raises, although not her own child, not her blood. Now, so from that, Rabb has several possible meanings. The owner, and notice here al-alamin, which means the world. So it could be the world, the owner of the worlds, the master of the worlds, the caretaker of the worlds, or according to the fourth, the what? The raiser or the upbringer of the world. Now these are the four views. In my own view, the word Rabb, since we know that in Quranic Arabic, the Quran uses the word Rabb in all four contexts. that means all four meanings have been validated. However, in my own view, in the same way you could validate four possible ways, but pick one as the most opportune, that the Qur'an validates all four meanings. But there is one in particular, for a variety of reasons that I think would just simply be too absorbing for us to go into. There is one particular that seems to be most fitting, as most appropriate. And that is the idea of the upbringer, the raiser. Now, if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, at least in my view. Why is that? Because you started out by saying, by the name of Allah. Allah, the one that I long for, attached to, dependent on. The one who I depend on for the normal activities that are only permitted by God's or Allah's mercy. And the one that I seek when I need specific attention of mercy. So the reason you're sitting right now here is because of God's general mercy. But the reason you need help in calamities and during hardship and difficult times is because of Allah's specific mercy. Whether it's Rahman or Rahim, and as you know there's disagreement. But the idea is the same. You call upon Allah to give me the specific attention. And then you say, Alhamdulillah, I acknowledge you as superior in acts and in characteristics. You are it. Rabb al-Alameen. You are my raiser, or you are my, not just caretaker, not just master, not just owner, which of course are all acknowledged, master, caretaker, owner. But you, through the act of acknowledging your superiority, you are also my upbringer. التربية means إنشاء الشيء حال بحال حتى تمامه. حال بحال. To إنشاء is to not إنشاء. إنشاء as one word. No. To construct something حال بحال, stage upon stage, حتى تمامه, until its completion. If you surrender to Allah, acknowledging your dependency on Allah, Allah constructs you stage by stage, brings you up, raises you stage by stage until you've reached your final format. It acknowledges the idea, the notion, that while we have a stable form, constant form if you will, the constant form being if our essence, that at the same time we have a highly transforming aspect, or we have a highly changing aspect about us. Very much like a seed that grows up in the soil to become a plant, taking several shapes that you cannot really recognize, you can see the similarity between one stage of a plant's life and another, but it transforms into literally a new being at every stage. Or like, what do you call this? A butterfly going through the larva stage and so on and so forth. A human being as well is brought up, is raised by Allah. If a human being accepts Allah as the upbringer, as the raiser, it's sort of it's you accept, while you cannot accept you do not pick your mother or your father, and they bring you up, and they bring you up in whichever format they bring you up in, and you really don't have much to say about it. With Allah, you actually pick if Allah is going to bring you up or not. If Allah brings you up or not, raises you or not. Okay. Okay. Now here, then everything starts falling into place. You are going to start reading the Qur'an, which, as we will talk about extensively, how it gives you then the details of this upbringing. But you start out, and in prayer as well, by acknowledging the dynamic, interactive, personal, individualistic relationship. Note what I said here. Personal, individual, interactive, dynamic relationship that you are going to have with Allah. You are going to be raised by acts of general mercy that allows you to exist, and the acts of specific mercy that come about only through the interactive dynamic relationship. Al-Alamin. Al-Alamin is plural form. Is plural form for what word? Alam. An alam, they say, the way you mention alam, you say تطلق على كل جملة متمايزة لأفرادها. How do you translate this? Alam is what you call a set that actually صفات تقربها من العاقل التي جمعت به. Okay. Yeah. Alam is, thank you, is what you call a set of individuals, not necessarily human, but just individual things, which are distinguished by sifat, by characteristics تقربها من العاقل الذي جمعت جمعه. In other words, a set of characteristics that bring it all together. So alam, the singular of alamin, which means a singular world, is what you call a set of individuals that have common characteristics, common enough to be a unit in itself. That's why we say alam al-hayawan, the world of animals. We say alam al-insan, the world of humans. We say alam al-jamad, the world of non-humans, or not non-humans, but jamad is like this table is jamad. Yeah. Now, here's a sort of here's a subtle point about alam, and so you start to appreciate how precise the Arabic language is. There's a characteristic. Imagine alam describes this process. There's a characteristic that comes to a set of individuals, brings them all together into one unit, because they all share in this characteristic. Jama'at jam'u. This is what we say. Jama'at jam'u. In lam takun minh. Wa in lam takun minh. Although the characteristic itself does not necessarily have to be one of the set that it forms. In other words, it is like something that comes and brings things together into sets, but it itself does not necessarily have to be one of the sets. Now, why is this so important? Because Rabb al-Alamin, plural, that God or Allah, Rabb, we already talked about Rabb, of all the alams. What's the meaning here? That there are all these different sets that came together because of a characteristic that brought them together but didn't unite with them. Is not a part of the set. Now God is the ultimate characteristic that brought all the sets, all the different separate sets together, but does it unite with them? Does it become them? No. وَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ مِنْهِ. In other words, God unites all the separate alam into alameen, all the separate alams into alameen, but it itself, God's self, remains aloof from them, separate and apart. So, the linguist said, العالمين لتمايزه وتقربه من الكل. عالمين لتمايزه وتقربه من الكل. عالمين لتمايزه وتقربه من الكل. What does that mean? لتمايزه وتقربه من الكل. لتمايزه, because Allah is distinct. Is distinct. Why? Because remember, the characteristics that bring all the different alams together doesn't become one of them. وَتَقَرُّبِهِ, but it unites them all under a common characteristic. So, تَقَرُّبِهِ means because of God's, the fact that God is distinguished from all, but yet close to all. And that's why it could not, the Qur'an could not have picked a more precise term to attach to the idea of Rabb than this. That's ultimate precision. Why is it ultimate precision? Because it picked the word that says, I am close to all of you, I bring all of you together, although I'm not one of you. I bring all the different alams together, all the different sets together. I share characteristics with you, but at the same time, I am not one of you. So, you acknowledge then the fact that you fall within a set, a specific set, and that is a set of human beings, let's say. You acknowledge by saying Ar-Rahman, under one school of thought at least, that all the different sets are dependent on the mercy of God. But you also acknowledge that all the different sets are raised by God into different capacities, in different ways. So a tree, for example, will go from a seed to a literal thing, to a full tree with multitude of branches, then will transform to wood, to perhaps a form of soil eventually, to and so on, continue to take on many different shapes and forms. While a human being will transform several times through life, through several stages, in a very different format. Be raised by Allah in a very different format. Now, alameen comes from the word alima and alam. Alam means what? When you say ism alam. Yeah, but alam, we call a flag what? Alam. It is the mark of marks, the focal point. It is the indicator as to the existence of something. God then is the alam. The alam, the indicator as to the existence of everything else. The focal point. But yet, you call something alam that is susceptible of being intellectually, not intellectual, but being susceptible of becoming, you becoming conscious of. Okay, let's approach it from a different perspective, from a different way, to make it more understandable. That what do you say about existence or human beings? Let's say alam. Alam must be something that is capable of consciousness. So you do not say alam al-sakhr, the alam of rocks. You can't say that. You can say alam al-hayawan, the alam of animals, right? You can say alam al-insan, the alam of human beings, but you cannot say alam al-sijjad, the alam of carpets. Why? Because rocks and carpets don't have a consciousness. Humans and animals have a consciousness. What's the importance of this? Is because only alam can be conscious of alam. That only those capable of consciousness will know the focal point. Another similar extraction is the word alama. And alama means indicator, evidence. And alameen then carries the meaning of indicators towards the alam. Indicators towards the alam. All of these sets of worlds point at what? Point at the alam, at the mark. So here again you start seeing the enormous articulateness. Is that a word? Articulateness? Excuse me? Articulation is so... Well, anyway, the enormous eloquence in the notion of connoting Rabb with Alameen. Yes. Point back to the Alam. Rabb is the caretaker, the master, the raiser of what? Of al-Alameen. The Alameen are united. The Alameen are all separate sets, right? Plurality of all these sets. But what brings them all together? What unites them? It's the Rabb. Because it tells you the caretaker or the raiser of all these Alameen. The caretaker doesn't combine with the Alameen. In other words, you cannot say Alamullah. But not from language, but from implication. You say that what is... So then we search for the essential characteristics of al-Alameen. You say, Ma alamul alameen. What is the essential, basic, focal point for all the different Alameen? And if you use the word Rabb with Alameen, it cannot be but Rabb. Because they do not come together through any essential characteristic but that. But the existence of a caretaker or the existence of a raiser. So if you say, for example, Alam al-Hayawan wa Alam al-Insan, you've already connoted two different worlds. The world of humans, the world of animals. What brings them together? Maybe the fact they have consciousness. But what is the Alam of these worlds? What is the essential characteristics that first brings the members of one set, let's say human beings, together, and then bring the different sets together but never combines with them? If you add the word Rabb to it, it cannot be but the caretaker or raiser. That's the idea. I mean, if this was poetry instead of the Qur'an, one would be extremely impressed by coming in and sort of combining language in this way to force language into acknowledging a relationship of dependency. Like you could have said, Rawhul Alameen, the spirit of the worlds. Here, the Rawh does not necessarily have to be the Alam. Why? Because it says it's the spirit of the worlds, but it doesn't necessarily have to be what all the worlds are about. I mean, in fact, the spirit could be in service of all the worlds, but it's not a master of the worlds. It's not above all the worlds. It's a servant. But once you said the Rabb, caretaker, raiser, you've by definition put the Rabb in a superior position over all the worlds, and consequently made all the worlds go back to that superior relationship. In other words, you could have used the word in which you have the worlds, and then you have an equal to the world. They wouldn't all point to the Alam. They would have another Alam. You could have used another word that made, like Rawh, which made, here are the worlds, and then use the word which made it inferior to the world. And then it's the servant of the worlds. And the worlds still need a different Alam. But once you use the word Rabb, you use the word that by definition means superiority. So you placed it on top. And then the Alameen all point upwards. If you will, the alameen is like, okay, you have the individuals. Here, like, you have individuals. See these little dots here? These individuals connect because of an essential characteristic they all combine. Then they've become alam. This is the alam now. A unit, right? The same process happens here, happens here, happens here, happens here, happens here. Each is a separate unit, not necessarily connected to the other. Now, you want to connect them. You want to say that all these different alams are alameen. They're all connected. You could use something that is equal to them, that connects them. You could use something that is inferior to them, that connects them. But the notion of alameen is arrogant. It necessarily only looks upwards. It doesn't look sideways and it doesn't look downwards. It doesn't notice anything unless it's upwards. Al-alameen points to alam. Alam by definition has to be upwards. That's why we call a flag alam. Why? Because it's high. It's higher. And then when you salute it, you look up. If the flag was at your level of eyesight, we wouldn't call it alam anymore. So, you have to use a word, terminology, that puts it in a superior relationship to become the alam, the focal point. And Rabb was the term. Okay. So that will raise you, raise others, Rabb also has a subtle meaning under any of the four schools. And that is the meaning of Jabarut. Jabarut is the ability to compel. To say, a mother raises a child to Rabbi al-walad. If she does not have the ability to compel the child, can you say that she raises? Not in Arabic. If she does not have the authority to compel, then she no longer is a murabbiyah. Tarbiyah. That's why, for example, when in Arabic we want to say, I will teach you a lesson, I will punish you. I say, urabbik, sawfa urabbik, means I will teach you a lesson. You say it in anger. It doesn't mean that I will advise you. I'll give you good advice. It means I will teach you a lesson by strict compulsion. Sure, you can give advice, but ultimately you have to have the superior power of compulsion. This is قوة القهر والجبروت. This is what in Arabic they call قوة القهر والجبروت. So the word Rabb implies also by necessity the ability to compel and direct. قوة القهر والجبروت. So when you said Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, you've already told God that you are in this dependent, interactive, dynamic relation of longing, even love, to that which is the alam, the focal point of all subsets that come into a unity, pointing upwards to the focal point. Once you've said Rabb, then you've said the caretaker, the master, the Lord, the raiser, the upbringer. You've acknowledged your, not only your dependency, but you've acknowledged your submission and the ability of that Rabb, the ability for compulsion and direction. But because you implied al-qahr wa jabarut, compulsion and power, it is remarkable that the Fatiha then comes and follows this by what? By what? Rabb al-Alameen is followed by what? Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It is as if Allah, after invoking the term which implies qahr and jabarut, it quickly reminds you that the essential characteristic by which you started hasn't changed, hasn't altered. Just because Allah is the Rabb and has the power of compulsion, it's as if He wants to remind you that yes, but also the Rahman and Rahim. Now, couple of very important points. When you said Alhamd, you are, as we said, acknowledging both the actions and the characteristics. And the characteristic is what? When you say ahmidu lak to someone, ahmidu lak, I have hamd towards you, you must be able to say, well, okay, what is it which characteristics are you acknowledging? Which characteristics are you saying that you acknowledge? Not only which actions, but which characteristics. And here is the answer to the question. Answer to the question is tahmidu liman. Liman it doesn't just mean for whom. It also means, okay, what actions, what characteristics? And the answer comes what? Rahman, Rahim. So then, what is the essential characteristic of God? Ar-Rahman and Rahim. That merciful in the general aspects and merciful in the specific aspects, as long as Allah is acknowledged as Allah, meaning Allah is engaged in a relationship of longing and dependence. No one that I've read drew that connection, but it's an interesting one. Is the action that we acknowledge, while the characteristic that we acknowledge is Rahman ar-Rahim, the action is the fact of bringing all these dispersed subsets into unity, into a coherent unity, seems to me a plausible position. Although I haven't read it, I haven't read anyone make that connection. Yeah. Right. variety of reasons, we don't need to specifically acknowledge a character in action, but we do. But it wouldn't be contrary to usage and sense for the action to be spelled out as well as the characteristic to be spelled out. In fact, it makes to me quite perfect sense that then Rabb al-Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim answers the question of, okay, you have hamd, but for which action and for which characteristic? And it tells you. The action is Rabb al-Alameen, and the characteristic is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Now, just to demonstrate to you how it works, let's say I'm teaching a halaqa, a different halaqa. Let's say 5 years from now. And let's say I become convinced of the point that Anwar makes. I may not use this point without accrediting it to Anwar specifically. In other words, I may not express it as I might say, such and such person said, and I agree with that person. But I may not just say it as if either I read it somewhere or I thought of it. Either of it would be considered a sin. The reason I keep emphasizing this because no one is more notorious than modern contemporary Muslims. I have never met more people capable of without the least shame, stealing ideas and not showing the least amount of acknowledgement of authority as contemporary Muslims. In fact, for some reason they think it's offensive for them to acknowledge authority. Yes?
When you say the alameen, it's almost the type of plural it is generally recognized,
Right.
which is generally used for things that are aql.
Right. Right.
Is that why you indicated
للعاقل, yeah.
for conscious? Is that what the distinction you're making into conscious, or is there any other?
لا, yes, جمع مذكر سالم, which generally is for the aql, but also or in addition to that, alam is only given to الذي يعقل. So I mean, in other words, while جمع مذكر سالم is generally used for this category, but there's a further connotation of meaning للمعنى that is in the word alam. So if I ask you, does alam connote the idea of yaqil, to that which is conscious? The answer would be yes. While if I say, does Jam' al-Muzakkar Salim connote the idea of consciousness? Not necessarily. I mean, maybe in a highly theoretical form, but I mean, you would need to philosophize to get to that point. But anyway, that's a good question. All right. Then the other point, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Now, oh, did you have a question? But here then you get into the school of thought where the Rahman is the characteristic, Ar-Rahim is the action, or Rahim is the characteristic, Ar-Rahman is the action. Let me put it this way. If someone made an argument like this, I would say within the realm of possibility, although I'm not convinced. Because it seems to me that both Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim are characteristics. It's just one is the characteristic of general mercy and one is the characteristic of specific mercy. But that's just my own inclinations as to the meanings. I would not exclude the possibility that you would find support for this view. Now, generally, in Arabic, you repeat why. Why do you repeat something? Emphasis. Or an answer to a question. Or to, not a question, but an issue. And here, if you said that Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim is part of Surah Al-Fatiha, then you have the repetition of ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Then we must know that the emphasis is laid on this idea of Rahman and Rahim. Mercy in itself connotes or implies an interactive process by which the grantor of mercy takes a personal interest in your affairs and knows your affairs. I mean, you cannot be merciful towards that which you do not know, except by accident. But whether you can call it mercy, then is a very big question. So for example, if I am walking and I don't realize it, but I just don't step on ants under me, is this an act of mercy? Well, I didn't do it intentionally, I just didn't notice the ants. Maybe if I would have noticed them, I would have stomped them. Now, if I'm walking and I see ants, and I go out of my way not to step on them, is this an act of mercy? Well, I intentionally avoided stepping on them, so it is an act of mercy, right? So mercy is not just something good happening, but it is something good happening from someone who notices what's happening. Something good happening, compassionate happening, from that who notices what is happening. If I, for example, I'm extremely busy, and students have a paper that's due on Friday, and because of my own purposes, I didn't, the interests of the students don't even cross my mind. Because I'm busy, I decide, turn in the papers Monday. Is this an act of mercy? No, because I really did it for my own interest. But what if I start feeling sorry for the students, and I say, they have so much to do and so on, and I postpone because of that, that is an act of mercy. So, mercy, Rahman, Rahim, connotes not only acts of kindness, but the personal element of knowing your affairs, knowing your needs, and granting them. So in one fell swoop, you've acknowledged this highly individual, personal interaction with Allah.